it was like complete and utter anarchy out there. But at the same time, it was like synchronized anarchy. Merhaba, hoş geldin arkadaşlar. Normally on this channel I talk to you guys about my experiences living in Germany, but for today I'm going to talk to you guys about what it was like for me to live in Turkey. I lived in Turkey for a year between 2013 and 2014, and I often reflect on my time living there with such happiness because it was such a wonderful experience. I learned how to snowboard in Turkey. I learned how to scuba dive in Turkey. I grew so much as a person, and it's because of Turkey that I really started to get into traveling. I lived in the city of Izmir, which is Turkey's third largest city after Istanbul and Ankara, and it's located on the west coast, about a 6-hour drive south from Istanbul. And I would describe Izmir as a very progressive and liberal city compared to the rest of the country. So throughout this video, just remember that while I did travel all throughout Turkey, my primary experiences are drawn from living in Izmir and during the 2013-2014 timeframe. Honestly, guys, I could talk so much about Turkey. I could talk all day and the video would be forever long. So to try to keep it more concise, I'm going to limit myself to talking about the things I most frequently get asked by people once they find out that I lived in Turkey. Tamam, I'm just gonna dive right into my favorite topic in life, which is food. And the Turkish food is so good, and I can say with absolute certainty that in the 30 years of my life, I felt my most healthy when I was living in Turkey. And part of that might be because I was working out twice a day for some reason when I was living there, but it's primarily because of the food and the quality of it and how fresh it was. And I would eat out all the time because it was relatively cheap for me to go out, and I just wanted to experience all of the Turkish cuisine. And I don't think I could have eaten more doner kebab. I ate so much of it. My favorite dish in Turkey is iskender, which is doner kebab served over top of fried pieces of pita bread, and then you pour tomato sauce on top of that and serve it with like a side of yogurt, and oftentimes there's butter with it too. Oh my gosh, that dish is so good, and I know it's not exactly helping my argument for the fact that I thought Turkish food was really healthy, but man, iskender is so good. And if you can find an authentic Turkish restaurant that serves iskender, I highly recommend it. It might change your life because it definitely changed mine. I also lived in a coastal city, as I mentioned earlier, so in addition to a lot of doner, I also ate a lot of seafood, and I loved how fresh it was. And guys, I could talk so much about the food in Turkey and how much I love to eat all of it, like manta and gevrek and borek and pita and dolma and all of the tatlı. Like, I could talk about it forever, but I will talk specifically about just one more thing, which is their breakfast, because there is nothing like a Turkish breakfast or kahvaltı. So when you order kahvaltı, it comes out, of course, with some cooked eggs and bread, and then all of these little dishes filled with olives and cheeses and sliced vegetables and butter and honeys and jams, everything that you could possibly want to eat for breakfast. And in the Black Sea region, it comes with koymak, which is a dish that's made of cornmeal and cheese, and it is so good. You put your fork in it, and if you were to pull it up, it just strings along with your fork because of the texture of it. And it is so rich and flavorful. You eat it with bread, and I'm getting really hungry for it right now, but it made my entire trip to the Black Sea region completely worth it. Okay, it's time to move on from food. So if you didn't know, Turkey, or the Republic of Turkey, was founded in 1923 in the aftermath of World War I, and it was founded by a man named Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And there is so much love for Ataturk among Turks, and especially in Izmir, you see his face everywhere hanging. You see it on t-shirts. They even transpose his face or his silhouette onto the Turkish flag and then hang that flag. And speaking of the flag, if you think Americans hang the flag everywhere, let me tell you, we've got nothing on Turkey. You can't look in a single direction without seeing the Turkish flag, at least when you're walking around in Izmir. It's everywhere. So I've talked to a lot of people from all different countries about my experience of living in Turkey, and it seems like there is one shared misunderstanding, which is what language they speak. A lot of people seem to think that Turks speak Arabic, and while there are Turks who do speak Arabic, or at least have a cursory understanding of Arabic, the official language of Turkey is Turkish, or Türkçe. I'm not a linguistic expert by any means, but I find the language of Turkish to be extremely interesting because it was basically developed in the past 100 years. Ataturk, in his attempt to move Turkey away from its Ottoman past, developed the Turkish Language Association, or TDK, and basically charged them with the responsibility of executing Turkey's language reform. And so in concert with TDK, Ataturk, one of the strategies he used was banning the press from being able to use Arabic and Persian loanwords that were so frequently spoken in that region. And instead, TDK would replace those words with Turkish words. And this strategy, along with some other efforts, worked to make Turkish the way we know Turkish today, which I found so fascinating. I read that there was a speech that Ataturk gave in the early 1900s that's been translated 3 different times since then, so that Turks today can read it and understand what Ataturk was saying, which I feel like shows how much the language has evolved over the past century. Does anyone else find this interesting, or am I like alone in my little nerd world here? Turkish is written with the Latin alphabet, and it has 29 letters, most of which are the same as the English alphabet, except they got rid of Q, X, and W, and then they added 6 additional letters, 2 of which my German audience would recognize. There are some Turks who know English, or who are at least a little familiar with it, but it is not spoken or written nearly as much as it is in Western European countries, and especially in Germany. And I showed up in Turkey not knowing any Turkish, so I had to learn some very creative ways to be able to communicate with people and get past this language barrier. And sometimes that meant playing an elaborate game of charades. Other times, if I had Wi-Fi, or as the Turks say, Wi-Fi, I would be able to pull up Google Translate and type on my phone whatever I was trying to communicate. And once I got to Turkey, I also took a class in Turkish, and just that little bit that I learned in that class was able to help me a lot more in getting around my daily life in Turkey. A lot of Germans have commented on my channel to express their disbelief that someone could live in Germany without knowing German. And I will just say that if I could live in Turkey without knowing Turkish, living in Germany and not knowing German is like a cakewalk. So again, I lived in the city of Izmir, which is extremely westernized and is even nicknamed Infidel City. And the clothing that people wore walking around Izmir was just like anything you would see in Europe or in the US. In fact, I think I saw girls wearing shorts that were just as short as what you would see walking around Miami. So I never had to wear a headscarf. I never had to cover up unless I wanted to go and visit a mosque. Otherwise, I just would wear my usual clothes while walking around. I will say though that throughout my year of living in Turkey, I noticed some changes regarding what women would wear. I got to Turkey in September of 2013, and I saw some women wearing hijabs, though I wouldn't say that I saw many women wearing hijabs, and I very rarely saw women wearing burqas. Now this is just in the city. If you started to move outside of the city, you would start to see more hijabs and more burqas, especially if you started to move more into the eastern side of Turkey. So remember, this is me just talking about what I observed in Izmir. Ataturk never banned the headscarf or anything, but as part of this shift towards secularism that he was always pushing for, he highly discouraged women from wearing them. And there was a law in place that forbade women from being able to wear the hijab inside government buildings, which included schools. But shortly after I got to Turkey in October 2013, Turkey's President Erdogan lifted that prohibition and started to allow women to wear the hijab anywhere they wanted. And because of that, with every passing month, I felt like I was seeing more and more hijabs and burqas than I did the month before. I get asked a lot if I liked living in Turkey and if people in Turkey were nice. Turks have a reputation of being hospitable, which they completely deserve. I felt so welcome and everyone was very friendly to me, and the friends that I made in Turkey are some of the most giving and caring people I've ever met in my life. And I'll just give some examples of what I experienced. So I would be eating outside at a cafe and a total stranger would walk by and say to me, Afiyet olsun, which basically means may it bring you health, may it be good for you. You use it similar to how you would use bon appetit or guten appetit. And of course the server, when they bring you food, will tell you Afiyet olsun, but it just was so charming to me that total strangers would wish you a happy meal just out of the kindness of their heart while they're passing you by. I was also a member of a hiking club when I lived in Turkey, and even though there were only a few members of the club who could speak English, every time we would break for breakfast or for lunch, people would come over and offer me some of their food just out of kindness. The scariest part of living in Turkey, from my very personal experience, was anything to do with vehicles. I cannot explain to you how scary and aggressive the driving is there. It is like something I've never experienced in the US or in Western Europe at all. It was like complete and utter anarchy out there, but at the same time it was like synchronized anarchy where everyone kind of knew what was going on, but nobody was following any sort of law. So like this speed was just a suggestion and everyone was hadi. The lines on the road were guidelines and you could cross them if you wanted to, whenever you wanted to, for any reason, without any sort of indication. And pedestrians never had the right of way. Even on the sidewalks, pedestrians never had the right of way. So it wasn't even that I was scared when I was in a car driving around Turkey, but I was also scared anytime I was walking on a sidewalk because I honestly didn't know if that was going to be the day that I would get hit by a car. It did, however, keep me on my toes, and I always felt alive while walking around the city of Izmir. Alright guys, I have legitimately at least 17 more things that I could talk to you all about my experiences living in Turkey, but I think that's a good introduction for now. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, because if I get a lot of likes on this video, then I will know, okay, they like this one, maybe I should do another video about Turkey. And if you have any questions about what it was like for me to live in Turkey, make sure you put them in the comments. If you're Turkish yourself or you've lived in Turkey and you want to weigh in on some of the things I said, you are more than welcome to. I'm excited to see what you guys have to say. Thank you so much, my patrons, for all the support you've given me, and inshallah, I will see you guys next time. Bye! Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit me up on Instagram at Kelly Does Her Thing. I just posted a photo of me from when I lived in Turkey for you guys to check out.